Sleep paralysis, or night terror, is an universal phenomenon that has been observed across cultures and races. Korea is, of course, no exception. In Korean, we say 가위눌리다 to mean to have a sleep paralysis. 가위 does sound the same as the word scissors in Korean, but it has nothing to do with scissors. It's actually a corruption of an old word that meant a ghost. As 눌리다 means to be pressed down, 가위눌리다 mean literally to be pressed down by a ghost. It is interesting to see, comparing to a bit more clinical sounding sleep paralysis, its Korean counterpart seems to have much more direct paranormal implication. Of course, by now we have scientific explanation what sleep paralysis is and why it happens, but that alone does not necessarily explain why our mind should conjure up such horrific images to attack ourselves for the very moment when we are most vulnerable. And indeed, some experience definitely seem to suggest something beyond the simple discoordination of our body and brain. As you would see from today's stories, here are 4 allegedly true stories about sleep paralysis from Korea. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by your host, Anthony. A story from when I was a middle school student. I was sleeping in my room as usual, only to wake up paralyzed. Because that was only the second time I had ever experienced sleep paralysis, I felt a bit scared with the situation and could barely get enough courage to open my eyes. The time must have been early dawn, and everything was in deep dark hue. At the time, I associated sleep paralysis with seeing ghosts around, and finding no such presence, I was relaxed enough to open my eyes fully. Then I saw hazy black figures floating in through the window of my room, slowly, one after another. Even though they were all undefinable black shadows, I could strangely feel who they should be. That's a kid there, and that is an old woman, and a middle-aged man behind. I kept my eyes narrowed in attempt not to get noticed by them. And these figures, one by one in line, started to step onto my bed, then my belly, before they disappeared into the wall. My bed was sitting against the wall on the opposite side of the window. Oh hell, couldn't they have some manners and walk around me instead at least? When about 15 of the shadow figures, all in different heights, trampled over my belly, I flipped my fingers in a desperate attempt to get myself out of the paralysis. And at that moment, all that black figures turned their heads in unison to look at me. I don't remember after that. I might have fainted or fallen back asleep. Following morning, I had to skip the classes because I suffered pain in my stomach. I haven't experienced anything of that scale so far, but can't forget that moment when they all turned to look at me. Once I made a holiday with 2 friends. At night we chatted over cans of beer, and somehow the theme moved to our experience of sleep paralysis. I was the first one to open the topic. The story went back when I was a high school student. Both my mind and body were knackered after days of tests, and sleep paralysis came just then. Somebody knocked on my door. I felt instantly goosebumps all over for some reason. "May I come in? May I come in? May I come in?" It was a husky female voice. I was frightened and started struggling to break the paralysis. The door opened, and then somebody was walking over to me. I screamed silently. My body was still paralyzed, and it all seized up with extreme tension. But then the step walked away again, and the door was closed. Oh, thank God it was gone, whatever that was. I sighed of relief. You thought I was gone? Hearing the whisper right in my ear, I jumped up with scream and swears. My story seemed to have scared one friend, but the other one just scoffed and then started his story. One day he was taking a nap. He woke up with a sense of paralysis and breathlessness to find a girl with long hair sitting on his chest, looking down on him with her bloodshot eyes. He was scared, but since he could not move anyway, he unwittingly went into a staring fight with the girl. Go away, damn you! He gathered his courage and swore at her with his frozen lips. But the girl only stooped down, putting her face closer to his. He was nearly fainting, looking into her eyes. Shit! He tried again, but the girl kept just blankly staring down on him. Suddenly he could hear his door bursting open, and his aunt, a professional shaman, shouting, "What do you think you are doing? Piss off!" and sprinkled something which he thought should be sea salt. The girl finally disappeared, and he got finally free from the paralysis. When he got up, his room was empty. No aunt, no salt scattered around. It must have been just a dream after all, he thought. And then he found 10 missed texts on his phone. It was from his aunt, saying, "Don't fall asleep! Wake up! Don't fall asleep! Wake up! Don't fall asleep! Wake up!" I and the other friend agreed that his story won for that night. I usually don't take any ghost stories or horror films seriously, but this story my grandma told me did spook me. My grandma separated from Grandpa for the reasons I'm not going to detail here, and for a few years lived by herself in a small place with 1 bedroom and kitchen living area. Since when she started to suffer sleep paralysis for days on, which left her exhausted. She reminded herself of a folklore that one could prevent sleep paralysis if one puts a pair of scissors under the pillow before asleep. Grandma went a step further and put a whole array of scissors and knives on a night table, their sharp ends all facing away from her, for just in case. She woke up next morning refreshed after the first sound night's sleep in days, and found 1 knife among all the sharp tools she arranged on her bedside the night before was turned around directing her head. Not long after, she left the place and moved in with us. Our home was rumored to have built on a troll's playground. Probably for that reason, we had all sorts of weird dreams there, and our mornings often started with what kind of dreams we had the previous night. I don't exactly remember when this happened, but I remember my dad was away for the night, and I and Mom were alone home. I decided to sleep in parents' room. Because of all the weird dreams I got, I used to try sleeping in different rooms occasionally. and Mom to sleep in the living room right outside the room. At night, the door to the room slowly opened. I was sleeping facing the wall, so I could not have actually seen it, but I still could see it. Wonder if that makes sense at all. It was a small man, all wrapped up with yellowing hemp cloth, and his face too was covered with a piece of hemp fabric. I didn't know at the time, but that's apparently how a body is typically shrouded before put in the coffin. The man slowly approached me and tried to crawl up on the bed with his tightly wrapped up legs. I was scared to death, but my body didn't move. I could just plead in my mind, "There are many evil people in the world, there's no need to harm me." Minutes of my struggle finally paid off, and as soon as I could move again, I popped out of the room. Mom was sleeping in the living room, and I snuggled up next to her to sleep with her. But then she got up herself and said, "Oh dear, I had a most curious dream." Apparently she too saw a man wrapped in hemp cloth entering through the hallway, and him approaching to her. She recited chants from Buddhistic texts to fend him off, and the man then turned around to enter the other room where I was sleeping. I told her that was exactly what happened in my dream too. It prompted her to stand up in the middle of the night to sprinkle sea salt about the entrance door. I don't know who that man was, why he came. Probably just a passing wandering soul, but that definitely was one of the worst dreams I had. In my 16th year, just with any other boys at that age, Hormone was raging in me relentlessly. Long before the time of computers and internet, the only material remotely sexual I could glimpse was some kiss scenes from a film or TV, or a CD magazine circulated amongst classmates. Even that would turn out all wrecked by the time of my turn, as other naughty boys would have torn away the pages of their favorite girl. One day a mate told me about his erotic dream he had the previous night. It was really just a silly dream of a teenage boy, but it was already tremendously exciting for me, so hungry of anything remotely sexual. I asked him how I could also get such a dream. His advice was that I should focus on all the dirty thoughts right before sleep. Desperate enough, I tried exactly that. Night after night, I dreamed of dragons, pigs, ghosts, and even aliens, but not a single beautiful girl ever appeared. I gave up in the end. One Sunday I had 4 basketball matches with friends and came back home exhausted. I could not be bothered washing or eating and just fell onto bed and dozed off. Probably about an hour into my sleep, I experienced a sleep paralysis for the first time in my life. I opened my eyes but could not move. Then I saw something. A figure was sitting on my belly. In the egg-shaped face behind the long black hair were no mouth or nose, but only glowing red eyes. It was wearing a white mourning dress as from a traditional horror series. I was terrified, and each second felt like an hour. But after some time, and upon close inspection, I started to notice the female figure underneath the dress. It wasn't half bad, especially the round bulge of the bosom. Even the round face with red eyes started to come across somewhat cute. Sudden surge of lust boosted my courage, and I started to clean my mind. "Hey, Miss Ghost, could you do something for me? Just once, please?" With that, the ghost's face started taking more shape. The missing mouth and nose appeared, and the eyes, though still somewhat bloodshot. All in all, not ugly at all. But its expression was like, "What's wrong with this boy?" It then started to disappear as if wiped out by eraser. I was desperate. "No, don't go. Just this once, please." But the ghost didn't give a second look at me and disappeared. Since then, I experienced sleep paralysis several more times during my teenage years, but never once a female ghost appeared again. So my conclusion is, raging hormone of a teenager could scare away even a ghost. Hi, this is Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. This was a bit lighter episode for me, meaning less culture specific. Hope you enjoy them nevertheless. I personally have not yet experienced a sleep paralysis. Nightmares, plenty, but no night terrors. And I probably cannot exactly fathom the sense of helplessness when that happens. Well, I do hope I don't have to experience it in the future either. I sincerely thank all my subscribers and viewers and your continued support. But the progress is definitely slow. I wonder if it would help should I create a Facebook or other social media page in conjunction to the channel. Well, if you have any advice or suggestion regarding the contents and marketing of this channel, please do let me know via comments. And if you haven't yet, do consider subscribing, liking, and sharing my videos. It will really help this channel grow in the future. Until the next, I wish you a wonderful week and take care.